So our next session is on inclusive insurance and climate change, and I would like to invite Mr. Bram, the Program Manager for the Pacific Financial Inclusion Program, to take over.
Good afternoon. Bula? Okay. I'm very pleased and honored to let's say, speak here and moderate a panel on insurance. We've just heard in the previous panel and in the presentation of Dr. Nellie Moore, I took note of a very interesting research that was done in 2014 in Ghana by Dean Carlin, which basically concluded that insured farmers make more productive investments. I think that's very, very promising. And on that note, I think this is a very interesting panel whereby we actually hone in slightly more deeper in a very specific aspect of financial inclusion, namely insurance. And we have a couple of distinguished speakers, unfortunately not somebody from the Pacific, so you have to do with me from the Pacific. So we have Anna Vardikyan from the Central Bank of Armenia, and from Bangladesh, from the Insurance Development and Regulatory Authority, Dr. Sheikh Mohammad Rezaul Islam, and all the way from, I think it's London, but originally you're from Costa Rica, Miss Andrea Camargo from the Microinsurance Catastrophe Risk Organization. So before we go into a brief presentation by Anna, I would like to use the Mentimeter tool again. So if everybody can use, just like you've done before, go to the menti.com. I'll do that myself as well. And probably need to reload, and you type in the code that you see in the screen. So this is a question for the regulators. Is your institution in charge of regulating insurance? So we have quite a number of central bankers here, but also in the case of Bangladesh, from a very specific regulatory authority, not the central bank, but very specific. Yes, interesting. So probably we need to crowd in some more regulators in the future. Do we have 27? I think we wait a bit more, 28, 29, yeah. Maybe we can go to the next question. Yeah. So you will see a couple of barriers. If you can identify those, that's one specific barrier that you feel that is most important to overcome when it comes to climate risk integration in insurance. So we have policy and regulation. In the case of, for instance, parametric insurance, we also have seen quite a number of challenges when it comes to the availability of data. Another one is access to reinsurance, which is also what I've personally observed here in the Pacific as well. And the knowledge gaps within the wider population. Insurance as a concept is sometimes not well understood. Or is there any other that you feel that we've missed? It spreads out quite evenly, though data seems to be quite prevalent, and the knowledge gaps. Yes. Okay, that's specifically the availability of data is something that is concurrent. That we've seen that in a research that PFIP did in the past, quite a number of years ago. I think around 5 years ago. This was one of the bigger challenges when it comes to designing and introducing parametric insurance in the Pacific. So that's good to know that it's still the, well, it's not good to know that's still the case, but that we still know that that is something that we need to address. Before I introduce all the other panelists and ask them to sit down, I invite Anna. Maybe you can introduce yourself, and she will do a presentation on the case of the insurance in Armenia, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I already know what the presentation will be, but it's a very interesting story. Thank you.
So, Bula. I am Anna Vardikyan from the Central Bank of Armenia. And first of all, let me take this opportunity to say thank you to AFI, firstly, for organizing this event and paying attention to this important topic. And of course, to the Reserve Bank of Fiji for their hospitality in this fantastic country that we experienced. So let me go with my presentation. I will introduce the case of Armenia of introducing insurance for crop insurance for different weather risks. Let me concentrate more on the topic of insurance, because the first slides I will go very quickly because the speakers before me already paid a lot of attention to this perspective, so I will go very quickly, and then if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. So, the first of all, why the Central Bank of Armenia starting to deal with this issue, climate change. So there are two perspectives that I would like to mention, and we also talked about much today. This is the macroeconomic and financial stability, and the second is developmental role of the central bank. I would like to mention that the Central Bank of Armenia is also the financial regulatory authority for all financial market in Armenia, including insurance. So, the first issue is starting with impact on agricultural production, which is one of the biggest sectors in Armenia, and to the extent that these climate-related risks can affect the stability of banks, insurance firms, and other financial actors, they need to be concerned of central bank. The developmental role, this is the second pioneer role that central bank is pioneering this project, this reform in Armenia, and starting to think about. I will skip this. So coming to the question, how it is related, the financial systems and climate change, then there are two perspectives as we see this. This is the first one, how the central bank can address. It is the design of services that can increase the accessibility, affordability, and usage of cleaner technology. And the second one, on which I would like to concentrate, is the financial services as a tool to build resilience in the face of shock related to climate change. So insurance, also we talked about insurance. My colleagues called to this importance of this topic. So all these risks we are facing in Armenia. And then I would like go a little bit more. This is the Just very interesting chart, which you can see the main perils in the geographical distribution through the Europe. And we can see from here that most of the risks for Central and Eastern Europe, for example, for mountain areas, now we're facing in Armenia. This is just for your information, so go to Armenia case. As you see, this is a small country, only 3 million population, and capital only 1 and 1.1 million people. So very easy to cover. For agricultural sector, it is one of the most significant economic sectors in Armenia. There are multiple microclimates allowing for minimum 27 crops to grow at commercial scale. However, agro production concentrated with subsistence farmers, as you see, the most of them. So they have a very small land, plots of land from 0.8 ha to 1.4 ha for these small farmers. And about 30% maybe, or something like this, of employed is working in agriculture sector in Armenia. For you to understand the importance and relevance of this sector for the economy of Armenia. However, despite of its important role, agricultural productivity stays below its potential. And important reason is the lack of effective risk management system, including the absence of agricultural insurance, which could shield farmers from local weather perils, hailstorms, floods, frost, droughts, 4 or 5 most important perils in Armenia. Also, it is one of the key factors that prevented the lack of investment in agriculture. That's why also the MOA, Ministry of Agriculture of Armenia, we had much discussions with them. They're also interested to attract investment in this sector, to grow, to do a gradual shift towards the commercial agriculture from subsistence farming. But it is not possible when there is a lack of risk management systems. What was situation in Armenia, I think like in other regions related to climate risks. There are financial losses caused by natural disasters increased substantially. Extreme droughts, hail, frost, other weather events threatening Armenia. For hail, we have a big, maybe half of the year, we have a strong hail, even during the summer season last year we experienced. Capacity to cope with the effects of natural disasters is very limited with farmers. And Armenia, as other developing countries, has also experienced all these problems. I don't want to repeat. That's why I try to skip some of them. Because we talk about this too much and that there are too much slides, just to mention only the second one, that insurance scheme reduced the dependence on public emergency assistance. I just would like to say that today, before we introduce this insurance product, agricultural sector depends on budget ad hoc payments, and this is relatively very, very low, very fragmented. It's just emergency situation after shocks are coming to the force, and then the government stay started to pay, and it's also a very stressful process for everybody. Also, I would say here, maybe I didn't mention, but it is also an issue for central bank, because many of these farmers have loans, agricultural loans, and then when these shocks come into force, many of them couldn't repay, and they come also to the central bank, to commercial bank, asking for some measures, maybe to refinance these loans, for increased terms of loan, for changing the currency of the loan, etc. This is also the emergency measures that we don't like usually, but we're just starting to work very intensively with the government to do something, and this situation is repeating each year. So comes to insurance system. This is, I think, just for information. And I would like to share with you the project that we started 4 or 5 years ago, the central bank, as a pioneer. And thanks to our development partners, our main partner is the KfW, who provides technical assistance together with Institute Resilience Fund. This is also a fund on behalf of the BMZ, which is creates for helping countries through insurance solutions to deal with climate changes in their countries. They also provide technical assistance. Then the Federal Republic of Germany, they provide grant on pari passu basis with our budget, with the government of Armenia, to provide subsidies for the first stages, for the first 4 years, for pilot, for insurance. And Swiss Re is our insurance coverage main partner, which is also our partner in developing the products, helping to develop the products from the scratch to be able to reinsure it in the future. So the first stage, it was 3 stages for the project. The first stage, it was the feasibility study. It was tendered to the Swiss company, and then investigates all the possibilities in Armenia. For the concepts, how we can deal with this, what is main relevant risks, what are the main relevant production or crops that we can cover at this stage. Then after it was the concept. After 2015, it was the concept that was discussed with all the stakeholders, which presented the main solutions which are feasible for Armenia. I could say that it was quite a long process, because we are working very closely with government of Armenia here, with the Ministry of Agriculture, also supporting us, the Ministry of Energy, emergency situation, also development partners, very multi-stakeholder project. At that time, the concept was developed, and main solutions, main findings were come up, and then it was this document was presented to the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, and then Prime Minister of Armenia. After each, we started the third phase of the project, the implementation or installment of the system. For this, we also did 2 international tenders, one for implementation team. Also, there are the symposium comes from different parts of the world. And then the second was for the reinsurance company that should cover the system, because it was one of the main components of our system and very important in order insurance companies to be able to enter, because, you know, this is a very hard system which is working with, it could be big losses, because it could be catastrophic losses. And then also, on the other hand, we wanted our insurers to help us in developing the projects, the products, actual products, because they usually have this experience and help from the beginning. In this case, they are more sure to reinsure. So after this process, we had the Swiss Re, which is one of the leading company. I think many of us know it, and they are our insurance partners, also working with us. also. How we are working now, there are different infrastructure that is created within this project. The central bank now is leading executive agency for this project, but the central bank founding the National Agricultural Risk Management Agency, or NARMA, to take over this role from the central bank after creation. It was chosen one institution because it is important topic for government also. I would mention that it comes also for government program, because the agriculture insurance putting in the government program, and they also demanding us, but as it should be a leader who could coordinate everything with so many stakeholders, multiple stakeholders. That's why the central bank take this role. And then we're now in the process of registering of NARMA. Until the end of the year it will be operating, I hope, because starting from February we have to sell our products because it is too much harvest related, and it should be, it has the season to sell our product. It is in February, before starting the season of hail and frost and etc. So what is the NARMA? This is the PPP body that founded by the Central Bank of Armenia, but all main shareholders should be insurance companies, commercial insurance companies, which finance this body, operational. This is non-profit body. And it should be board with representatives of public sector, including MOA, Ministry of Agriculture. I think that Farmers Union also should be presented there. Now we're just thinking about whether the Ministry of Agriculture could be able to cover this role. If not, we will have other representative also from Ministry, from Farmers Association. Then it should be the central bank representatives in the board, and also insurance companies representatives, two insurance companies representatives on rotational basis, in order to ensure that all insurance companies will cover this at some time. So the main functions that this body should implement, this is development of the product, of course, of agricultural insurance, because we started now with 2 products. This is hail and frost, but we will come up over the year, 1 year, during these 4 years with other perils also. There are drought especially, there are flood, etc. And also, which is more important, we will cover other crops. We have 10 crops, which are priority crops for Armenia, and we will add these crops add by year. We decided to start the system more simple in order to understand better who is who and how it's work, and then we will add, because for agricultural insurance it is also about loss adjustment, and we have to be very careful with loss adjustment guidelines and etc. to be set up. For each crop, for each product, it's separate and other product. Negotiations with the reinsurance company. This is very important. Why? Because NARMA will do pooling, collecting from all insurance companies, and then do reinsurance agreement with the Swiss Re on behalf of insurance companies. And why it is important, because for Armenia, for example, we are a small country, fragmented insurance companies and small stake, and this is not interested to the reinsurance. Just my colleague said a little bit before that it should be interested also to private sector, and we are thinking about this all the time as a central bank, because we don't want to have some social fund, because we have already government. If we want social fund, government can distribute this ad hoc payments. And we want to have a feasible system, insurance product that could work and be sustainable in the future, and maybe to eliminate it at some extent the subsidies level, and just to have feasible market product. That's why we are thinking all the time about interest of insurance companies, private insurance companies, to come in and to keep their interest into the system. That's why when we started negotiations with reinsurance company, I should say that it was before we announced the tenders, we started to understand whether there is an interest or not, because also on the other hand, we wanted to have reputable insurance companies with high rating. Why? Because we have to be sure that tomorrow when event come into place, they are able to cover the risks. And then we understood that reinsurance companies also interested in the big scale to have one person whom they can, not person, but maybe body with whom they can deal. That's why we come to this solution to pool. The next one is the facilitation of the subsidy provision by the government. I think it is clear, and certification of the loss adjusters. This is also very important because in Armenia there is no loss adjusters institute for crop, for agriculture. So it is also creation from the scratch. Product development, I just trying very shortly because it's too comprehensive. I cannot cover everything. And then if you have questions, I will answer. So we come firstly for the most critical product for Armenia. It is grapes and apricots, because we have a big export of these products. We have a pretty big wine production, brandy production, you know, the famous Armenian brandy, etc. So it's very, very key areas, and everybody interested. I was in these villages with that consultants, and listen, the people and farmers, they are very interested, and they are waiting, everybody, when we will start, because now they cannot buy this product. It is not available in insurance companies. So then we did the data collection methodology. It was quite hard. It was fragmented data. We collected it over 1 year from different institutions, from UNDP studies, from Hydromet, collecting all the information historical on weather event or the severities of the events, etc. Also, we used the help of the MOA, Ministry of Agriculture, and they collected also data from several communities, from the mayors of communities, and mainly for yield data, there was a missing of data, but for geographical data, for hail, for weather events, for severity, etc., it was more or less on the place. So we're just combining these methods. The team, consultants team, come to some pricing here, and also they work very closely with the Swiss Re to comparing these prices with international prices in the region, especially for these products, etc. So come up for some solutions that we hope that it will work. Subsidy level 50% for hail, and I should say that we have quite affordable prices, surprisingly for us, for farmers, and because we did the mapping of the risk zones into 5 maps, 5 regions. If you can see, there is with high risks and with lower risks, and frankly speaking, only starting from first 3 category, there are quite a low prices, affordable prices, but then only the 2 higher, most risky communities, they have more or less higher prices. So why I'm talking about, because this is a potential that we can go out from subsidies and somehow for some communities and maybe leave for extreme communities the subsidy provisioning from government. Loss adjustment system, we're working very intensively also on creating loss adjustment system, including methodology creation. And as I mentioned, it is different for different crops, for apricots, for grapes, then testing this methodology on the fields with different farmers, creating all these forms, guidelines, etc. We hope that it will be, because we're now working on MIS, it will be online, everything. We did negotiations with training institutes in Armenia, ICAO, etc., and they are ready to provide training for loss adjusters because I think the NARM at the beginning cannot be able to cover this, but maybe in the future. So they can cover this one. And also now we're designing MIS system, which is very important to have all the information collected within the NARMA from all insurance companies, also linking it to weather data, yield data, to have actual data. We think after 1, 2 years, 3 years, we can start to check already our pricing and our calculations. So, as a minimum for the future, strategically, we think to provide coverage for the top 10 crops produced in country, considered focus crops. This include wheat also, wheat and potato. We're thinking including next year. We're already working on this. And then apples, tomatoes, melons, peaches, etc. And also included perils, risks. It is expected to later include all the perils which can potentially damage their harvest. Hailstorms, drought, flood, frost, excessive precipitation, windstorms. This is the main perils which are in Armenia. So, namaste.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing this story with us. It's clearly a couple of years heavy lifting with so many different stakeholders, different ministries, reinsurers, insurance companies. And for a small country, I think that's an interesting lesson that we can learn also for some of the Pacific countries, that we also deal with smaller populations, etc. And well, not similar climate related. We don't have hail, but we definitely have our own issues. Now I would like to introduce someone from Bangladesh. Doctor, please, the floor is yours, and share with us some of the stories from Bangladesh and how you, as a regulator, have worked with the industry to present some. Yep. Yep. Use your clicker.
Bula. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for a nice presentation by Armenian people, and in fact, I have been impressed, and I have been able to know about the crop insurance, and particularly I have been able to know about the NARMA. I think NARMA, your National Agricultural Risk Management Agency, NARMA. Okay, thank you. I would like to thank AFI and RBF for arranging such kind of seminar here, and some important issues are being discussed. And I shall try to discuss on some environmental aspects. And you know that it's a great threat for us. Globally, day by day, there is a variation of environmental behavior in this world. So, main thing is to be considered here. Those who are drastically affected, being drastically affected, they are our poor people, our common people. So, it's a thing to be considered, and let's put our eyes. And it's known to you that in several ways, the temperature of our world is being increased day by day. And the environmental change is identified very severely, which affects us in several ways. Now, let's put our eyes, and I shall try. In fact, I made many slides from my part to present here. So I have deleted many slides, and I shall try to present some slides in front of you. That is, as I was telling, that as the temperature is being increased day by day, so as the ice in this world is being melted, in fact it's known to everyone, so the sea level is being increased day by day, resulting that is there is a increase of evaporation, high temperature, increase of evaporation, and then decreasing precipitation in the dry season. There is variation. When we need rain, there is no rain. When we need cold, there is no cold. So these things should be considered in our discussion. And as I have told before, that the increased solar melting of snow, which is being the cause of rising sea level. But from my part, regarding Bangladesh, what is being, as the sea level is being increased, then there is inclusion of saline water into the soil. As a result, this is being the threat of growing different types of crops, livestock, and fisheries. And there is a dot here. And the different types of effect is being observed due to the climate change, you know. And there is the increase of flood intensity. And submerge of coastal area, as I have told before, that the inclusion of saline water into the mainland, everything is affected our agriculture. I think not in Bangladesh, I think this is a common scenario all over the coastal belt country. And if you consider that this is our world and this is Bangladesh, as I have discussed and I have expressed here, if the sea level rises regularly, and it is thought that if it is 1 meter sea level is risen, then this is Bangladesh, and the main part of Bangladesh, about 1/3 of Bangladesh will go underwater. So it's a great threat. As I have been realized coming from Fiji, I think that this is one of the problems like Bangladesh here. These problems, as I have seen in Vietnam, these problems are in Sri Lanka, India, I think like this, and many other countries. So it's a threat for us. Why it is being done? I think the thing behind this screen, who is X, is the emission of carbon dioxide. So in this world, just at a glance, I want to say that total emission of carbon dioxide is being occurred by China, that is 28%. United States, 15%. India, 6%. Russia, 5%. Japan, 4%. Germany, South Korea, Iran, Canada, Saudi Arabia, approximately 2%. And some countries like Poland, Turkey, Italy, France, Australia, United Kingdom, Africa, Indonesia, Mexico, 1%. And rest of the world, 21% emission of carbon is being occurred by rest of the world. So these things should be considered. But I want to say that please don't take it otherwise. There is no significantly emission of carbon dioxide from our country like Bangladesh, but we are being drastically affected for the emission of carbon. These things should be thought very deeply. If it is not thought positively, I think within short time we will lose our world. We will lose our happiness in this world. This is reality. And sources of carbon, you know that there are many sources of carbon. Natural gas, just I have shown a data here. Natural gas, CNG gas, there is no emission of carbon from CNG gas. Diesel, gasoline, electricity. From these sources, carbon dioxide is emission. Major household gases, that is carbon dioxide, methane and other gases, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases, and these are the sources of greenhouse gases. And major sources of greenhouse effect. That is, you know that there are, I have shown a slide here, that is from how much percent it is coming from agriculture, how much manufacturing thing, residential, etc., etc. That is energy production, from energy production, how much it is coming. This is the thing at a glance, you may observe it. Now, as I was telling, increasing area affected by soil salinity. That is, this is the coastal belt of Bangladesh. Perhaps you have gone to Bangladesh from Cox's Bazar to Satkhira. There are huge lands which is under the coastal belt is actually affected by salinity soil. And these are some pictures. In fact, you know that this is a barrier of Bangladesh to be developed. You know that the present government is trying heart and soul to make it developed, and from less developed country, we have been declared as developing country. So these things are being the threat of our country on the way of developing, I think. And this is the pictures from coastal area, and the people, in fact, have been affected. It's a common scenario. You can see every year in Bangladesh. As I have informed that 2 times Fiji was affected by cyclones, is it not, this year? So exactly like this, these countries are being affected. And this is the some scenario in flooded area, particularly the coastal belt area in Bangladesh. Actually, it's a slide, this poverty level is being, yeah. And what we are doing in Bangladesh to mitigate this problem. Actually, as from my own experience, I can say that if these things are not mitigated, financial inclusion may help to mitigate this problem temporarily. But if we want to have the permanent solution, we should put our eyes as discussed here. We have you know that in Bangladesh there are 78 insurance companies, of which 2 are government regulated, that is government insurance company, Sadharan Bima Corporation and Jiban Bima Corporation. Sadharan Bima Corporation has taken the weather index-based crop insurance program. Actually, it is in fact the initial stage of crop insurance in Bangladesh. They are working. They took 5 years plan pilot project, and at best, as I know, that they have got some result, but I think it is not enough. And another company, you know, that these are the, in fact, the product of the insurance company. This is the product. And another insurance company Green Delta Insurance Company, private insurance company. They have chalked out a program, and they are in fact doing their job in insurance field of insurance on crop insurance. That is Green Delta Insurance Company. They have taken a program on crop insurance. They are working. In fact, in case of crop insurance, we are in initial stage, and I have been shown the finger from this part that I should be stopped now. So it's today we should keep our hand to hand that we shall make our world colder and we shall save our world. We shall save our environment. We shall keep the stability of our environment. We want to keep our world in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Last but not least, I would like to invite Ms. Andrea Camargo from the Microinsurance Catastrophe Risk Organization to briefly explain and first and foremost introduce yourself and briefly explain what your role is, because unlike the two regulators, your role is slightly different, but in my background research, I understand that you've quite a lot of experience when it comes to regulation and policy work in insurance, so I'm very pleased to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Bram. Yeah, well, I am wearing two hats today. I am a close collaborator of the Access to Insurance Initiative, which is the implementation arm of the International Association of Insurance Supervisors. I have been working on regulation on inclusive insurance for the last 13 years. So that's my regulatory hat. And also I am wearing a second hat that is more from the private sector. So I am the Chief Strategy Officer of the Microinsurance Catastrophe Risk Organization, which is a reinsurance company that has been created by the support of Mercy Corps, the KFW, and other stakeholders in order to promote these type of products to protect the most vulnerable against natural disasters. So my experience is basically started from the regulation perspective. I have provided advice to regulatory authorities from several countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and so on. But also I understand the perspective of the private sector and how we need to collaborate and strongly look for ways that allow the offering of this type of products as what you are doing in Armenia.
Yeah, thank you. Andrea, before I hand over to actually to the public and the audience here, maybe can you share some examples from your experience that may be relevant to the Pacific? And I specifically look at your let's say, Latin American background, and probably you've had some exposure in the Caribbean, because I think when it comes to similarities of countries, the Caribbean, they are to a certain extent quite similar in terms of market size, the weather-related risks. Are there any examples that you can share with us that we may take home and yeah, would be quite interested in that.
Yeah, sure. I will raise awareness about one example that actually I think that was mentioned by Habiba before, which is the CRIF, is the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Capacity, which is basically a tool that aims to pull risks from the sovereign level. So this is actually risk transfer, but from the macro perspective. The reason why the Caribbean focus on that approach that is proven very successful, I will give you some interesting numbers, actually 19 countries of the Caribbean are part of it, is because they are very fragmented, They're small countries, and being able to pull together make them much more appealing for the reinsurance market, and it's much easier to transfer those risks in the reinsurance market. So that's an interesting alternative and an interesting lesson learned. I just wanted to share some interesting facts about the CRIF. So the CRIF has made already 38 payouts up of today. 13 out of the 19 members have already received those payouts. And the policies, well, the total amount of payouts has been raised on $139 million. So you can see that effectively it's a appropriate risk transfer tool from the macro perspective. And maybe to complement this, disaster risk financing is about complementarity. It's not only about one tool. So I just refer to a macro solution, a solution that is for the governments. But at the same time, some entities in the Caribbean are trying to create some synergies between this macro solution with micro solutions. So when I refer to micro solutions, I'm talking about, for instance, about microinsurance. So for instance, MCII, which is an organization that is fully supported by the Munich Re Foundation, they are effectively designing products in the countries that are part of the CRIF in order to create some synergies between this macro product and microinsurance product. So that's an approach that I think is very interesting for the Caribbean, for the Pacific island countries.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Actually, we have not announced it officially yet, but we have just signed an agreement with MCII specifically to replicate those lessons from the Caribbean into the Pacific. So pleased to hear that. I would like to ask maybe from the audience before we continue the discussion here on the podium. Are there any questions so far from the audience? Yes. Maybe.
Thank you. I'm Raj from Sugar Fund. Maybe for the Bangladesh example is you had quoted that they are government insurance companies taking up the microinsurance. Is it so? Am I had it correct? So that means there is a compulsory regulatory requirements to have those insurance in place, because in Fiji, I think it has been trying, the regulators, the government, and as well as some of the insurance companies have been trying to get this, but we were unable to do so. So is it in Bangladesh, you did mention that there are some government insurance companies. So in that way, could it be like a private sector and the government can come up together and form up a, what you call a crop insurance entity for that nature, or those sort of things?
You are from?
Yes, that is for you.
You are from?
Sugarcane Growers Fund. We actually lend for cane farmers.
Thank you for your question. You know that the regulatory authority of Bangladesh, Insurance Regulatory Authority, that is Insurance Development and Regulatory Authority. In fact, I want to focus on two words, that is development and regulatory. We are wanting to develop first, then we want to regulate. But we are doing this thing. The insurance companies, who are in fact doing wrong, we of course administrate them. And by the by, I can tell that insurance companies are settling their claims, and from the people, that is regulatory authority, in fact, a strong authority, you know, in every country, that is regulatory authority. We go to the field, we go to the program, which is sorted out by the insurance company to distribute their claim, one thing. And you know that IDRA, that is Insurance Policy 2014, we have. And we are trying to amendment some things on this policy, which is in favor of client as well as in favor of the insurance company. We are doing like this. And we have the training center from where we can develop the efficient insurance people, exactly like this. We are trying to. Yes. And by the way, IDRA, in fact, like a newborn baby, In the year, perhaps you know, he knows about IDRA. IDRA, actually it was developed in the year 2011. And in fact, we have started our job at the end of 2011. And we are doing like this year. We are trying. Thank you.
Just add one more point. I think we also have been trying over here in Fiji, we're trying to get the data of, you again talked about climate pattern index and all those things, which is very difficult for us. I have been actively involved. So we came with some sort of a solution to start off even the pilot project. Our colleagues from New India Insurance are here. Just look at a coverage as an input cost. So input cost means actual labor cost for the crop, your plowing, your harrowing, putting the cultivation, just have the input cost covered. So whether that you think would be easier than to look at the climate pattern and getting the index and then come to a coverage, just a very simple model that you want to make it.
Yeah, I admit, it's very difficult to have data, that is environmental data. And it's very difficult to identify the level of the damage. It's very tough. In fact, I attended several seminars on this project in which your Indian people are present there. Actually, you know that government is giving huge amount of money as subsidy to the people. Huge amount of money. You can't imagine. But mechanized cultivation is being done here and there in Bangladesh. On the other hand, not only on fertilizer, subsidy on fertilizer, seeds, mechanized cultivation, etc., etc. So I think that we must have the commitment, Commitment should be on behalf of the insurance people. Commitment should be on behalf of the clients. Those are actually being covered by insurance. And I think that, as I have told in my presentation, that we are at the initial stage. And another insurance company, there is Green Delta Insurance Company. They have chalked out a program on crop insurance. They are doing their job as best as I know. They are doing well. And from this experience, we are trying to increase the insurance, that is crop insurance activities in our country. Actually, you know that weather index-based crop insurance, this theme is, from my part I can tell, that I am not criticizing, it's very tough. Yes. As you know, that after having the data from the from a weather center, you cannot calculate the damage level of crops. It's quite tough. But there are many factors which are interacting each other to produce crop, and this is reality. So, as I know that in your country, I went to India, Hyderabad and Mumbai 2 times. You have many agricultural products. Oh, sorry. In India, you are not in India. Sorry, Fiji. India, they have many products. And we are trying to increase our products. We are advising our insurance company to develop new products on crop insurance. This is it. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add in terms of like the benefits, because I understand that weather index insurance products are quite complex and difficult, not only to design, but also difficult to communicate, not only to the end client, let's say like a smallholder farmer, but also to the government and to other institutions like financial institutions and so on. But it's important to see also the advantages in terms of like rapid payouts, which is something that we know that in the case of natural disasters is key. So it's important that, and I think that the linkage that I wanted to do is with the regulatory authorities, because also for supervisors it's a challenging topic, because index insurance brings non-indemnity products. It challenges the non-indemnity principle. So in that respect, supervisory authorities have been taking a lot of steps and advice from for instance, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, in order to enable that kind of solutions, because otherwise it will be very challenging with the current regulatory frameworks. So that's an important challenge for supervisory authorities as well.
Thank you. Any, Shalan?
The question that I wanted to ask, in all these sort of crop insurance, is the government paying the insurance in bulk, or you have a model where the individual farmers pay? And how much has technology been used to make sure that there is efficiency of payment of premium and claims processing, so that in longer term, because I don't know how long can government sustain these sort of programs. At the end of the day, it's got to be self-sustaining.
Yeah.
So how much are we looking at the entire value chain or the cost structure in terms of sustaining this for the long term?
Can I give this question to Anna, or
Anyone?
Me.
ladies first?
Yeah. So maybe because she is involved in this sort of research and actual product, so maybe she can start in the middle.
Shall I answer, or this lady?
Lady first.
Ladies first. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will tell you a little bit what happens in general, and the truth is that most of the interventions on index insurance worldwide are like heavily subsidized by the government. But in the particular case of the intervention that we have been moving forward in Central America and now in Colombia, is not subsidized by the government and is not subsidized by any of the supply value chain practitioners. So basically it's the end client who pays the premium. And in order to achieve that, we use a lot of technology in order to model a product that could be affordable enough. We do a lot of demand studies in order to understand what is the is this working? We have done a lot of demand studies in order to understand what is the sensibility of price from the part of the end client, so we don't end up offering a product that's extremely expensive. So that's something that we need to consider, and I think that it's a very important topic, because I completely agree with you. I don't think that we should continue on the path on fully subsidized products. We need to find a clear business case on that. We need to make them affordable so like end clients can pay it. And also we need to be very clever in order to identify who else has an insurable interest there, who has an economic interest of protecting this population. And this is where I bring the attention to very innovative and interesting interventions that, for instance, involve exporters. There is an intervention in Colombia with Nespresso. It's actually Nespresso paying for the premiums of the insurance product in Colombia, so coffee growers have access to insurance. So it's also very interesting to see who else can pay this premium, who can be interested as well.
Yeah, Anna? Yeah.
I just would like to add to my colleague's point that in Armenia, for example, we are planning to link it to loans, agricultural loans, insurance, making it mandatory for the farmers who have loans. And banks, for example, they are very interested in maybe covering some costs for farmers for insurance, because in this case, the risk is decreasing for them, substantially decreasing, and they are very happy, and we have the negotiations, and they agree to offer less percentage point for agro loans to that farmers who has the insurance. And in this, they just subsidizing, let's say like this, the portion of the insurance price for farmers. This is also the interested in this program.
Thank you. I am adding something with your answers. That is, yeah. You know that I raised this question before here, sometimes here. You know that we are we should not depend on the financial inclusion only. We should provide technologies for the farmers. You know that in coastal belts, if suppose we think that saline water has been there is an inclusion of saline water, then of course you should think about the saline resistant variety of crops. You should develop the saline resistant variety, and it should be extended towards the farmers, among the farmers. As for example, in Bangladesh, there are actually the scientists, researchers of Bangladesh has developed saline resistance variety of rice, jute, vegetables, etc., etc. On the other hand, suppose the area is flooded. Shall you wait for without cultivating crops? No. There is a technology on the floating water to produce vegetables or many other crops. So, we should not depend only on the insurance money or subsidy money. We should go to the fields of the farmers, and we have the agency, that is the Agriculture Ministry, doing work. We shall go to the farmers. We shall tell that you should cultivate this variety of crop. You should change the cropping pattern of that area. If you think that if it is forecasted that within 15 days or 1 month, a cyclone may be occurred, then the farmers should think about the crop which is to be produced. That is, an early variety should be produced, or a late variety should be produced. Exactly like this, fisheries and livestock is like this. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, there, the front table.
Good evening, friends. I am Subhas Mehta from Chief Operating Officer from New India Assurance, Fiji. We have our Indian operations, and we are the largest insurer in India as well as largest insurer in Fiji as well. Of course, in India, New India Assurance has been participating in the crop insurance which is floated by Government of India, and it is highly funded, highly subsidized by Government of India. Initially, the crop insurance in India was purely on input cost basis, and subsequently with the intervention of Government of India, the element of market value was also included in that. But again, it is heavily subsidized. My question to the reps of Armenia as well as Bangladesh is that since you are already on the verge of installation of this scheme, agricultural scheme, I'm interested to know more about the methodology for fixation of the premium price, number one. Number two, whether that premium will remain stable over the period or it will be dynamic on expiry of the annual period. And number three, is there any deductibles which the end user is required to bear?
Thank you for question. For premiums, we set it on annual basis. We think that after each year it should be reconsidered, taking into account the actual data that we will collect during this year, actual data on losses, on weather events, on severity, and etc. So then we will adjust it by market price. There is set up also for 10% for franchise, for deductible for the farmers. This is the flat rate for all farmers. For subsidy level, also it should be a flat rate, 50 percentage point we will start. From the beginning, we thought about maybe differentiating this subsidy level for big farmers, for subsistence farmers. But then we just learn about different experience in the world that it is very hard to manage for market abuse, etc. When the big farmers, they start to split their farms into the small plots. And then we decided to start simple, and then after understanding the market, as I said, we think about maybe on one hand differentiating the subsidy, providing more subsidy to more vulnerable, to smaller maybe, and for commercial big farmers, maybe we can eliminate it at some point. On the other hand, we think about, as I presented in my presentation, maybe at eliminating the subsidies at some point for less risky zones. As we see, we have less risky zones and we have bigger, most risk zones. And maybe we can just leave it for these most risk zones, because it will be high premiums for these zones, and it will be hard for farmers to repay. Also, we think about adjusting these zones after practical and actual data that we will have on the actual zone where they are. Then also, always you should compare your subsidy spending for other government paying from the budget. Because today also, for example, in Armenia, there is yearly government spending which set up in the budget from the beginning of the year for these disasters. So they are paying today. They are paying for all these shocks which are coming. So it's not that it is now free for government, let's say like this. And some part of funds still there is in the budget for covering these losses, and they will just substitute with subsidies. And this is another point. Sorry, maybe I didn't answer something?
Actually, I am more curious to know whether for fixing the provisional premium rate also, have you taken the services of any actuarial people? Any actuarial valuation was carried out to fix the provisional premium rating?
Yes, as I mentioned, we had 2 teams, implementing teams, and before it was people which we hired for feasibility study. And now we have actuarial team working on our project. It is the consortium from MF Strategy, Switzerland, and Microinsurance from USA, and we have actuarial team which are working together with us and together with Ministry of Agriculture, because they're providing the data to us and we're providing this data to actuarial people. Also, we collect the data from banking loans and coverage and many types of data that they're asking. So it's more than 1 year's working on this data. Firstly, it was just raw data. We collected through all the communities, through surveys going on the place, having interviews with farmers, to collecting data from the places, because, you know, in Armenia, it is not a developed country, and this is not too much data available. Actually, we don't have good data on yield, as it is in many countries, and more or less we have data on weather. But also for weather events, we just guess that not all weather events even captured by these stations, maybe the big weather events, and maybe it is also not so much representative. So after it, of course, all these actuarials worked on this to have this risk mapping and basis risk for this, all these regions. And after sum up some other costs, you know, operational costs coming for loss adjustment costs, etc., top up, and then coming to the premium rates. After it, these premium rates goes for validation to reinsurance companies, Swiss Re, and also comparing to international prices. For example, for the neighbors countries, in Turkey, for example, for Tarsim prices, because there are more or less similar weather and production, and to understand whether it is comparable or not. So after this, all this validation, we come up with several premium rates for several sums insured. We decided to put some levels, 4 or 5 levels for sum insured, and some levels depending on sum insured coming to the premium. Why? Because farmer is know exactly what is about his farming and how much losses he has usually, and this is the person who knows better than we in our places. That's why we decided also for our insurance to give them the freedom to the farmers to choose which one he think is more relevant to his land, to his spot, and then he can choose from these different options for one sum insured. Actually, the coverage include more or less.
I think we need to be conscious of the time, and I see that we're really going into the weeds of your product. I really like that, and I urge you to continue the discussion. But before we wrap up, I want to ask for one more question from the audience. Is there anybody who wants to raise one more question? No? I have one last question that's actually, it's a question for Andrea. What, to your opinion, are, let's say, emerging trends that you see across the globe that are relevant to the work in the discussion that we currently have?
I'll probably focus on something that was mentioned in the session on resilience, and something as well that you asked, which is the problem of last mile. Because if we don't focus on trying to solve that problem, even if the government receives funds, for instance, through a macro solution, will be very difficult to reach those who are actually in need, and also will be very difficult to implement any microinsurance solution, and even a meso-insurance solution that will target financial institutions. So I will come back to the point that Habiba mentioned before. And I will just give an example. 2 years ago, I did a focus group discussion in one of the most remote parts of Colombia. Basically, it takes 6 hours to get to the place, and you need to take a plane, then you need to take a boat, bus, anyway. We reached there, and we find out that there was a huge problem of access to financial services. But most of the inhabitants of that area, they had access to Sky TV, which actually in Colombia is extremely expensive. So what I would suggest is, like, in terms of solving this problem of last mile, effectively to see what other service providers are doing in order to cope that geography issue. I'm just going to show the other side of the coin from the sides of the regulator. If the regulation doesn't enable that, let's say, a mobile network operator or like a small store in a very remote village doesn't commercialize insurance products, doesn't transfer information about these products, it will be very difficult to cope with that last mile problem. So this is why the private sector and the public sector need to collaborate strongly, because supervisory authorities should be able to promote and enable this type of innovations, but at the same time, like, protecting consumers. So I'd say don't always try to focus on exploring innovation, bringing the supervisory authority to understand that innovation and help them to cope with this big challenge that supervisory authorities have, which in my case is like a balancing act. It's very complicated for a supervisory authority to allow innovation and market-based approaches, and at the same time protect consumers in those emerging economies. So I would suggest just to always create this dialogue.
Thank you. And with that, we finished the panel, and I thank you for your contributions. Very, very interesting, and yeah.